What if you built the perfect fortress, engineered to withstand every weapon you knew, only to be haunted by a sound unlike any other? A sound that could crumble stone to dust and turn steadfast courage into pure terror. For the Japanese defenders on Peleliu in 1944, that sound had a name: Akuma no Hokou, the Devil's Roar. By 1944, the Japanese Imperial Army was bruised and battered from relentless battles like Tarawa. Those brutal fights hammered home a painful truth. Holding the beaches was a losing gamble. The old strategies, where defenders waited for enemies to land before fighting back, had only led to devastating losses. Instead, Japan's commanders decided to rewrite the rules. No longer would they defend the shoreline. This hard-learned lesson set the stage for a new, more cunning form of warfare. On the coral island of Peleliu, a new kind of warfare was about to be tested. Colonel Kunio Nakagawa, a man renowned for his defensive genius, took the hard lessons learned from past defeats and forged a plan unlike any before. Instead of standing and fighting on the beaches where enemies could pour in, Nakagawa dug deeper, literally. With relentless precision, he transformed this jagged island into a fortress carved from rock itself. Every ridge, every hollow, became a trap designed to bleed the invader dry. Here, Nakagawa was writing the rules of defense in coral and concrete, preparing his men for a brutal, protracted fight far from the shoreline where hope seemed all but lost. On Peleliu's Bloody Nose Ridge, Colonel Kunio Nakagawa had transformed the landscape into something terrifyingly methodical, a fortress carved straight out of the coral earth. This wasn't just digging in, it was engineering on a grand scale. Hundreds of caves and bunkers, carefully sculpted and hidden, formed an intricate defense network designed to withstand relentless American bombardments. Every ridge became a deadly stronghold, a silent predator waiting beneath the sun-soaked coral surface. Nakagawa's work wasn't just about walls or trenches, it was about creating an unbreakable labyrinth, a masterpiece of war that turned nature itself into a weapon. Carved deep into the coral limestone of Peleliu, over 500 caves and bunkers formed a grim underground maze, a subterranean network of death. These weren't just simple shelters. Each was meticulously crafted to shield the Japanese defenders from the relentless American naval and aerial bombardments. Inside these tunnels, soldiers could withstand siege for weeks, hidden from the devastating fire raining down above. This vast hidden fortress transformed the island into a nightmare for the invading Marines, who had to fight through layers of unseen defenses, never knowing when an ambush would strike from the shadows. These underground positions were no ordinary bunkers. Reinforced with thick concrete and steel, they were engineered to withstand the fiercest naval bombardments and relentless aerial assaults. Every inch carved from the stubborn coral limestone was designed to be a fortress, impervious to destruction. It was a daunting challenge for any attacking force. These weren't flimsy defenses. They were hardened citadels, built to endure. Yet within this seemingly invincible stronghold, an unseen vulnerability was about to be exposed, one that would change the course of battle forever. Nakagawa's plan was as ruthless as it was brilliant. Instead of meeting the Americans on the beaches where they had previously been slaughtered, he would force them inland into a maze of fortified positions carved straight from the island itself. Here, in these underground bunkers and caves, every step forward would come at a steep price. His strategy was simple in concept, but brutal in execution. Bleed the invaders dry with relentless, grinding attrition. There would be no quick victory, no flashy charge, only a slow, torturous war of endurance designed to break the spirits and bodies of those who dared to advance. This was a fortress built not just of stone and steel, but of calculated, cold-blooded resolve. Inside the fortress, Captain Hideaki Suzuki's machine gunners stand as the embodiment of discipline and precision. Every position they occupy has been meticulously chosen, calculated to maximize their deadly effectiveness. These are not haphazard placements, they are strategic strongholds, designed to weave an intricate web of overlapping fire that traps any attacker in a deadly crossfire. Suzuki's men know their roles like clockwork. Each patrol knows exactly where to aim, when to hold fire, and how to coordinate with their comrades. In this hidden network of caves and bunkers, discipline is their greatest weapon, and readiness is their lifeline. Their Type 92 machine guns were more than just weapons. They were carefully arranged traps, set to create deadly zones where escape was virtually impossible. Each gun's field of fire overlapped perfectly with another's, weaving a web of relentless bullets across the battlefield. This setup turned the rugged terrain of Peleliu into a silent killing ground, where every inch was watched, every movement anticipated. For the American attackers, inching forward meant stepping into these carefully calibrated crossfire zones designed not just to wound, but to break the enemy's will before the fight even began. The Japanese defensive doctrine at Peleliu was absolute. Every conceivable detail had been studied, every American weapon and tactic analyzed, to prepare for any eventuality. Years of brutal combat experience had taught them the hard truths of warfare, and they bent their minds toward anticipating every threat. Their manuals were packed with strategies to counter infantry assaults, aerial bombings, and naval bombardments. But despite this painstaking preparation, one weapon remained a haunting blind spot, an unexpected force that none of their exhaustive training could fully grasp. This unwavering confidence, built on meticulous study and deep discipline, would soon be challenged in ways they never imagined. Despite their painstaking preparation and detailed manuals, the Japanese defenders harbored a critical blind spot, a weapon so new and formidable that it simply didn't exist in their playbook. This oversight wasn't about tactics or bravery. It was about facing a device that defied their understanding, a threat whose destructive power and psychological impact would shatter even the most ironclad defenses built on Peleliu. In the shadow of their bunkers, a silent weapon waited one with the power to change the course of the battle in a way no manual could predict. This single omission wasn't just a minor oversight, it was a fatal flaw that undermined everything the Japanese defenders had painstakingly constructed. Their entire defensive strategy, brilliant in its design and brutal in execution, relied on anticipating every American move, every weapon in the Allied arsenal. Yet, in all their meticulous preparations, they had completely failed to account for one game-changing weapon, the M2 Browning, 50 caliber machine gun. Without understanding its destructive power and psychological impact, their fortresses were vulnerable in ways they could never have imagined. This gap didn't just threaten their plans, it threatened to unravel the entire battle before it even began. The M2 Browning, 50 caliber machine gun wasn't just another weapon. It was an industrial beast born from the mind of the legendary John Moses Browning back in Ichen-Jobai Ishiba. Designed initially as an anti-aircraft tool, its true power was only fully realized on the ground, where it transformed into a terrifying force of destruction. Thick, half-inch armor-piercing rounds tore through steel and concrete alike, far exceeding any threat the Japanese defenders at Peleliu had ever faced or could even imagine. This was a weapon unlike any other, raw, relentless, and poised to rewrite the rules of warfare forever. Originally crafted as a high-flying anti-aircraft weapon, The M2 Browning's true terrifying power wasn't fully realized until it was unleashed on the brutal battlefields of ground war. What started as a tool to fend off enemy planes quickly found its lethal niche in ripping through hardened fortifications and enemy lines. This transformation turned the M2 from a defensive guardian in the skies to a relentless force on the ground, a machine gun that redefined what sheer firepower could accomplish in close-quarters combat. The M2 Browning machine gun is nothing short of a beast on the battlefield. Imagine a half-inch thick, armor-piercing slug hurtling out of its barrel at nearly 3,000 feet per second, faster than a speeding bullet and powerful enough to punch through hardened steel. It's not just a machine gun, it's a mobile force of destruction, engineered to shred enemy defenses with relentless precision. This weapon's sheer velocity and stopping power make it a game changer, turning fortified positions that once seemed impregnable into vulnerable targets. In the hands of a skilled gunner, the M2 can rip through bunkers and obstacles, reshaping the very nature of warfare. This wasn't just any machine gun, it was a weapon on an entirely different level. The M2 Browning was more than firepower. It was a mobile artillery piece, a steel juggernaut engineered to rip through armor and fortress walls alike. Its half-inch rounds tore through steel plates like paper and shredded bunkers that were supposed to be impenetrable. Imagine an unstoppable force that could turn seemingly invincible defenses into rubble, a relentless hammer pounding vulnerable points until collapse was inevitable. This was the key to rewriting battlefield dynamics powerful, brutal, and absolutely terrifying. The M2 Browning wasn't just any machine gun, it was a game changer with a deadly advantage. Its lethal range stretched over a mile. This distance dwarfed every standard infantry weapon the Japanese had prepared for, leaving their finely crafted defenses vulnerable. While their fortified bunkers could stop rifles and lighter machine guns, they were utterly exposed to the thunderous hail of half-inch armor-piercing slugs speeding silently across the battlefield. It was as if the Americans had brought artillery with the rapid fire of a gunner, an overwhelming power no one on Peleliu wanted to face. Behind every M2 Browning, 50 caliber machine gun lies a staggering reality far beyond the battlefield. It isn't just firepower, it's the beating heart of an industrial war machine, an intricate, vast logistical network powering relentless waves of ammunition. Factories like the Lake City ammunition plant spit out over 500 million rounds a year, fueling an endless storm of steel. While Japanese soldiers scrimp and conserve every bullet, American gunners enjoy a flood of supply so overwhelming that shooting without pause becomes a strategy. This tidal wave of fire made the M2 not only a weapon of destruction, but a symbol of America's vast industrial might, a force that would soon reshape the fate of Peleliu. The sheer scale behind the M2's relentless firepower was staggering. At places like the Lake City ammunition plant, more than 500 million rounds were produced each year, solely for this weapon. This industrial might meant the American war machine never had to hesitate. Ammunition was endless, ready to feed the insatiable hunger of the 50 caliber beast. While Japanese defenders clung to every bullet, American gunners wielded an unstoppable torrent of steel, a flood of firepower that would rewrite the rules of siege warfare forever. While a Japanese soldier is ordered to conserve every precious bullet, an American M2 gunner wields a near-endless torrent of firepower. It's a staggering contrast, a soldier clutching a handful of rounds versus a machine capable of spitting hundreds of bullets per minute without pause. This overwhelming supply changes everything. It means the M2 can hammer targets relentlessly, suppressing enemy defenses with unyielding force. The sheer volume of fire isn't just about destruction. It's a psychological weapon, breaking down resolve with every deafening burst. This industrial flood of ammunition becomes a force multiplier, turning the tide before battle lines even fully form. At precisely 0612 hours, under a sky heavy with gray clouds, the invasion of Peleliu erupts into chaos. Amtraks churn relentlessly through the surf, their engines roaring as they push towards the shore. Sergeant Raymond Fitzgerald and his small crew brace themselves for what lies ahead, the deadly blizzard of Japanese fire pinned on the island's coral ridges. Every moment counts as the roar of battle swells around them, marking the start of a desperate struggle where every second could mean life or death. The assault has begun, and the fate of the Marines hinges on what comes next. As the first wave of Amtraks reached the shallows, Sergeant Raymond Fitzgerald and his three-man crew plunged into the chaos, waves crashing around them, bullets spitting from unseen enemy positions. The salty water tugged at their gear as they waded through, the weight of their 128-pound M2 machine gun threatening to pull them under. All around, the battlefield erupted into a deadly storm of gunfire and mortar shells, turning the water into a frothing, shattered battleground. Each step forward was a struggle, a fight against both the elements and the fury, waiting just above the ridge. Fitzgerald's focus narrowed survival meant finding solid ground and readying the gun that could change everything. They wrestled their 128-pound M2 heavy machine gun, its weight like an anchor dragging through the chest-deep water. Every step forward is a struggle against the currents, the chaos of battle roaring around them. Ahead, the Japanese machine guns on Bloody Nose Ridge open fire, turning the water into a deadly maelstrom. Yet Fitzgerald and his crew push on, gripping the tripod, hauling their massive weapon toward the shore, because this gun isn't just heavy, it's about to change the war. Japanese machine guns and mortars erupted in a relentless storm from the ridge above, transforming the once calm water into a frothing battlefield. Bullets and shells churned the sea into deadly foam, forcing Sergeant Fitzgerald and his crew to fight not just the enemy, but the harsh terrain itself. The chaos was suffocating every splash and crack, a reminder of the lethal traps waiting just ahead. They pushed forward, each step heavier than the last, burdened by the weight of their 128-pound M2 machine gun and the unyielding onslaught from above. The bitter reality: survival meant finding a way through this hell of fire and water. As the first wave of Marines pushes inland, Colonel Nakagawa's carefully laid trap springs to life. Suddenly, hundreds of hidden camouflaged bunkers erupt with deadly machine gun fire, cutting through the advancing troops like a storm of bullets. The Japanese defenders, concealed within their rock-solid fortresses, unleash a devastating crossfire that pins the Marines down on the exposed beach. Every step forward becomes a desperate struggle against a perfectly engineered nightmare, turning the Coral Island into a furious battlefield where survival hangs by the thinnest of threads. From hundreds of hidden camouflaged bunkers, Japanese machine guns unleash a relentless barrage, cutting into the advancing Marines with devastating precision. The deafening crack of gunfire fills the air, creating deadly crossfire zones that pin down the attackers and turn the once hopeful beach into a gauntlet of steel and coral. Every step forward becomes a fight against unseen enemies lurking in the shadows, their weapons cleverly positioned to trap anyone who dares to move. The American advance grinds to a halt as chaos erupts, bodies falling in the choking dust and fire. It's a brutal welcome to Peleliu's unforgiving defenses. The Marines charge forward, but their momentum crashes against an invisible wall. Machine gun fire from the hidden bunkers fire a relentless barrage. The roar of bullets cuts through the salty air, pinning the men down on the exposed beach. They can't advance. They can't retreat. The blood-soaked sand becomes a deadly trap with nowhere to hide. Fear mixes with frustration as every step forward feels like walking into the jaws of death. Trapped in this crossfire, the soldiers brace themselves, waiting, watching, desperate for a way out. Amid the relentless chaos, Fitzgerald and his crew hauled their colossal M2 heavy machine gun through the surf, every step a battle against the weight and the pounding sea. The 128-pound beast dragged like an anchor, but there was no time to hesitate. Blood and smoke swirled around them as Japanese machine gun fire tore into the water nearby. Desperation drove them forward. Finally, they reached the relative safety of the beach and desperately sought a firm spot to settle the gun, a place where the M2 could roar its steel thunder and rip through the seemingly unbreakable defenses ahead. This was their moment to shift the tide of battle. Behind the shattered palm log, the massive steel of the M2 sank deep into the gritty sand. Every inch of it screamed weight and power. Sergeant Fitzgerald and his crew moved quickly, hands steady despite the raging chaos around them. This was no ordinary setup. They were positioning a weapon that could rewrite the brutal rules of siege warfare. The air was thick with smoke and fear, but beneath all that, a quiet determination took hold. They readied themselves, knowing that the roar about to tear through the island's defenses would bring a new kind of terror, one the Japanese strongholds had never faced before. Fitzgerald's gaze locks onto the massive bunker, a fortress carved from coral and reinforced with thick concrete. It sits nearly 600 yards up the ridge, well beyond the effective reach of standard infantry weapons like the BAR or the M1919 machine gun. Rifles are useless against such a hardened target. This bunker isn't just a dot on the map, it's a symbol of Nakagawa's deadly defense, a key strong point designed to stop the Marines cold. But Fitzgerald knows the M2 Browning is no ordinary gun. With armor-piercing rounds loaded, this behemoth has the power and range to reach right into the heart of the enemy's fortress. Now, the question is, can this single weapon rewrite the rules of siege warfare? That bunker sat so far up the ridge that no standard infantry weapon could touch it. A BAR, or a regular M1919 machine gun, would fall hopelessly short, unable to pierce its thick defenses. Rifles were utterly useless, their bullets like spit against stone. It was as if the Japanese defenders had built an impenetrable fortress, perfectly suited to shrug off every assault weapon except one. The challenge facing the Marines was brutal. How do you crack a fortress designed to snuff out every bullet you've got? But the M2 was anything but standard. Fitzgerald's assistant gunner loaded a heavy belt of armor-piercing rounds into the feed tray with a practiced hand. Every link clinked sharply as the massive cartridges fed into the weapon. This was no ordinary machine gun, it was a relentless beast, engineered to tear through the toughest defenses. As Fitzgerald gripped the spade handles, the M2's weight grounded him like a promise of deadly power. The air around them crackled with tension. Could this single gun, wielded by just a handful of men, rewrite the rules of siege warfare? The answer was about to thunder across the battlefield like nothing anyone had ever heard before. Fitzgerald's hands tighten around the spade handles. He lines up the sights, every muscle taut with focus, as he pulls the charging handle back with a powerful, determined motion. Here, in the chaos of Peleliu's bloody shore, one gun could change the fate of a siege. It could rewrite the rules of warfare itself. The world was holding its breath, about to witness whether this single weapon, the M2 Browning, could shatter more than just concrete, that it could shatter hope. The time is 0614 hours. Fitzgerald takes a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle over him. His hands steady against the fierce vibrations of the M2, a massive beast of a machine gun that seems almost alive. Every muscle tightens as he prepares to unleash a thunderous roar, unlike anything the island's defenders have ever known. In this suspended moment, the air is thick with anticipation. One trigger, pull away from changing the course of the battle forever. Fitzgerald's finger tightens on the butterfly trigger. Then, with a thunderous roar, the M2 machine gun springs to life. The sound is not just loud, it's earth-shaking, a deep, hammering concussion that rumbles through the battlefield. The enemy has never heard anything like this before. Each 50 caliber round tears through the air, thundering toward its target with brutal precision. It's the opening salvo of a weapon not just designed to kill, but to break the enemy's will. The battle for Peleliu is about to change forever. A sound unlike any before. Not just the rapid chatter of machine guns, but a deep, hammering roar that vibrates through the very earth beneath their feet. It crashes over the battlefield like a dark thunder, shaking bones and shattering nerves. The Japanese defenders freeze, caught off guard by this primal, overwhelming noise, a relentless wave of power that carries with it the promise of destruction. This is no ordinary gunfire. It's the ominous voice of the M2 Browning, 50 caliber machine gun, a weapon so fierce it seems almost alive, reshaping fear and breaking their resolve with every deafening blast. The 50 caliber rounds streak across the battlefield, slamming into the bunker's facade with unstoppable force. Each shot tears through steel-reinforced concrete, exploding chunks of coral limestone like shattered glass. The sheer power is unlike anything the Japanese defenders have faced. This isn't just gunfire, it's relentless destruction, hammering away their sanctuary. As the deafening roar echoes over the ridge, the seemingly invincible fortress begins to crumble, revealing a vulnerability no one anticipated. What was once a symbol of unbreakable defense now trembles under the searing hail of steel, and the battle's momentum hangs in the balance. The armor-piercing slugs don't merely scrape the surface or leave small cracks, they obliterate it completely. Each round hits like a sledgehammer, smashing through glass, ripping through the reinforced concrete with brutal force. Explosions of coral and concrete fragments burst outward, scattering debris like deadly shrapnel. Against this relentless barrage, the once impervious bunker starts to crumble, the fortress walls turning to rubble under the unyielding assault of the M2's thunderous fire. This wasn't just destruction, it was the breaking of a psychological barrier, a sound and force the defenders had never imagined possible. Chunks of coral limestone and concrete, each as large as a man's head, exploded outward with violent force. The impact wasn't just a crack or a chip, it was a full-on shattering, sending deadly shards flying through the air. This was no ordinary gunfire, it was overwhelming destruction, ripping apart the fortress stone by stone. In that moment, the sheer power of the 50 caliber rounds left no doubt. These fortified bunkers, once thought invincible, were breaking apart under relentless assault. The roar of steel meeting stone echoed across the ridge, a thunderous confirmation that the battlefield's balance was shifting and rapidly. Fitzgerald's finger stays firm on the trigger as the M2 roars relentlessly, pouring a fierce cascade of half-inch steel slugs into the bunker's walls. Each shot tears deeper, cracking the coral and concrete, sending shockwaves through the fortress. The bunker, once an unyielding symbol of Japanese resolve, begins to crumble before the pounding assault, its defenses shredded one bullet at a time. Outside, the battlefield holds its breath, witnessing the weapon's devastating power not just to break stone, but to fracture the very heart of the enemy's stronghold. This is more than destruction. It's a new kind of warfare unleashed. In just under 2 minutes, the bunker that once roared with lethal machine gun fire falls utterly silent. The Japanese defenders, who had seemed invincible within those reinforced walls, are now mute. The relentless hail of 50 caliber bullets from Fitzgerald's M2 machine gun has broken their grip on this critical stronghold. It's more than a physical defeat. The silence carries the weight of a shattered defense and a crumbling spirit. This moment marks the first tangible crack in Colonel Nakagawa's masterful fortress, signaling a turning tide that the defenders never saw coming. Nakagawa's fortress had stood unyielding for months, its tangled network of caves and bunkers designed to hold firm against any assault. But now, at this crucial moment, that fortress showed its first real crack. The critical strong point, a linchpin in the carefully interwoven defensive line, was no longer invincible. The unbreakable barrier, hammered relentlessly by American fire, had shattered, leaving a gaping hole in the defense. This was more than just a tactical loss. It was a blow to the very foundation of Nakagawa's strategy. The defenders' confidence wavered as their seemingly impenetrable bulwark was broken, exposing the vulnerability that would soon ripple across the entire island. The battle was turning, and the stalwart fortress was beginning to crumble under the weight of overwhelming firepower. The sight of Fitzgerald's success ignited a wildfire among the other M2 crews along the beach. They didn't hesitate. With fierce determination, these gunners shifted their massive weapons toward new targets, joining in a relentless chorus of destruction. Each burst hammered the once-thought impregnable fortifications, tearing through concrete and coral alike. The air grew thick with the thunderous roar of the M2S, an unyielding storm of steel cutting down defenses and repeatedly breaking the enemy's grip on the island. The sound wasn't just noise, it was a declaration that the tide of the battle was turning, a brutal symphony that undermined Nakagawa's fortress one bunker at a time. A wave of panic, born from a sound never before heard, begins to ripple through the Japanese defensive lines. The eerie, thunderous roar of the M2 Browning machine gun shatters the relentless silence of Peleliu's bloody ridges. Soldiers, hardened by years of brutal combat, find their resolve shaken as this unfamiliar terror sweeps through their ranks. It isn't just the destruction, it's the overwhelming presence of an invincible force, reducing fortresses to rubble and turning steadfast courage into urgent fear. The ground itself seems to tremble under the relentless barrage, and with every crack of the gun, the defenders' confidence crumbles, shaking the very foundation of Nakagawa's fortress. For the first time, a shiver of dread spreads through the defenders. Their once impenetrable fortresses, thought to be safe havens, reveal their true nature. Tombs carved from coral and concrete. The M2's relentless roar isn't just breaking walls, it's crushing spirits. Beneath the earth, behind those reinforced bunkers, courage falters. Panic takes root where discipline once stood tall. The sound, raw and unyielding, carves a new reality. No longer can the defenders cling to their deadly strongholds. The ground itself becomes an enemy, turning safety into death trap. In this moment, confidence shatters like brittle stone, and the tide of battle begins to shift irrevocably. Within days, the psychological impact became impossible to ignore. Marine intelligence intercepted a series of Japanese communications messages, so revealing they remained classified until 1973. These weren't the usual reports of troop movements or ammunition shortages. Instead, they expressed a raw, desperate panic, a chilling break from the stoic discipline the Japanese forces were known for. Commanders, once unyielding in their orders to hold ground at all costs, were now pleading for permission to abandon fortified positions fully stocked and seemingly impregnable. This marked a seismic shift, a crack in their iron will, as the relentless thunder of the American M2 machine guns tore through not only concrete, but the defenders' spirit itself. The intercepted messages peeled back the calm veneer that Japanese troops were known for. Instead of steely resolve, commanders were sending out desperate pleas, laced with panic, a stark and shocking departure from their usual disciplined stoicism. This wasn't mere fatigue or frustration, it was a profound unraveling of morale, a silent admission that the unyielding defense, once thought impregnable, was starting to crumble under an invisible, relentless assault. The relentless thunder of the M2 was not just breaking bunkers, it was shattering hearts and breaking the will to fight. For the first time in the Pacific War, a startling shift shakes the Japanese command. Field officers, bound by tradition and honor, now send urgent requests to abandon their fully stocked fortified positions. These are no hasty retreats, born of defeat. These are officers grappling with an unimaginable weapon, breaking their will. It's a quiet fracture in their iron resolve, signaling that something new and terrifying is forcing them to reconsider everything they thought unbreakable. This moment marks the beginning of a desperate unraveling, as the defenders confront a force that doesn't just threaten their bodies, but shatters their very spirit. This act shattered a fundamental code embedded deep within the Japanese defenders, the sacred doctrine to hold their ground, to fight and die exactly where they stood. Such a betrayal signaled more than just tactical retreat. It was a fissure cracking the foundation of their unwavering resolve. In a war defined by honor and sacrifice, surrendering a fully supplied, fortified position was an unthinkable disgrace. Yet, under the relentless assault of the M2's deafening thunder, even the most disciplined soldiers found their will fracturing, their courage eroding in the face of an enemy whose weapon transcended mere firepower, its shattered spirit itself. Lieutenant Colonel Harold Deacon's eyes scanned the chaotic battlefield through his field glasses, disbelief etched deep on his face. Before him, Japanese soldiers, known for their unwavering discipline and iron resolve, are abandoning fortified bunkers that stand untouched, their defenses seemingly unbreached. This is no ordinary retreat. It's a breakdown born not from overwhelming firepower, but from terror, the psychological grip of a sound that has come to haunt them. The once impenetrable strongholds of the island now echo with the unsettling silence of panic, as the M2 Browning's relentless roar shatters more than just concrete. It shatters the defenders' very will to fight. What unfolds through Deacon's binoculars is unexpected and unsettling. These disciplined Japanese soldiers, famed for their iron resolve, are abandoning their strongholds, bunkers still intact, untouched by flame or bullet. It's not fear of immediate assault driving them back. It's something more insidious. They're retreating from the overwhelming, thunderous presence of the M2 machine gun. Their very courage, hardened by years of training and doctrine, is cracking under an unrelenting sonic onslaught they've never faced. This moment shatters every expectation about the battlefield, signaling a psychological collapse anchored in sheer firepower and sound. The Japanese soldiers weren't fleeing from an overwhelming barrage or a sudden flamethrower attack. No, their terror was something far more insidious, the relentless, thunderous roar of the M2 Browning. This wasn't just gunfire. It was an unyielding, deafening sound that shook their souls. Every sustained burst hammered away at their nerves, breaking down their resolve bit by bit. The relentless Devil's Roar was a weapon of psychological destruction as much as physical devastation, forcing disciplined warriors to abandon their posts not because they faced death outright, but because the sound alone crushed their will to fight. Captain Vincent Russo, an intelligence officer, makes a crucial observation in his report. The M2 isn't just killing them, it's breaking something far deeper, destroying their will to fight. Imagine facing a weapon so relentless, so brutal, that it doesn't just tear through flesh and stone, but shatters your very spirit. How do you stand strong when the sound alone erodes hope, when courage falters before the first bullet even lands? Russo saw that this wasn't just a battle of guns, but a psychological war being waged by the sheer power and thunderous roar of the M2. It was as if the gun spoke a language of doom, forcing an enemy to confront a terrifying new reality. Resistance might be futile, not just because of firepower, but because fear had already claimed victory. It is systematically destroying their will to fight. Imagine facing an enemy not just capable of wounding your body, but crushing your spirit before a single bullet finds its mark. How do you battle an opponent who can extinguish your courage, unravel your discipline, and render your bravery meaningless? This is the harrowing reality that unfolded on Peleliu, where sound and firepower combined to erode even the fiercest resolve. The roar of the M2 Browning wasn't merely an assault on flesh and bone, it was a psychological hammer, shattering the very foundation of resistance. In that moment, combat became more than survival, it became a desperate struggle against fear itself. The gun's sheer destructive power was more than just physical, it was a psychological avalanche. The inevitability of death it delivered was so stark, so chillingly impersonal, that to resist was to invite madness. Imagine standing there, knowing any moment could be your last, the pounding roar of the M2 slicing through hope itself. It rendered every act of defiance not just futile, but utterly insane. This weapon didn't merely break bodies, it shattered spirits, warping courage into a desperate, paralyzing fear. In that hellscape, holding a position became a choice between living shattered or dying on their own terms, and often, the line between the two blurred beyond recognition. The psychological collapse witnessed on Peleliu was no abstract theory. It was a stark, brutal reality experienced firsthand by American officers in the thick of battle. As they observed, the unyielding discipline of the Japanese defenders began to crack under a relentless assault, not just of bullets, but of sound and sheer destructive force. This breakdown in morale was as tangible as the physical damage to the fortifications around them. It marked a turning point, revealing that sometimes the most powerful weapon in war isn't just firepower or tactics, but the ability to shatter the enemy's spirit before the fight truly begins. The Japanese defenders' greatest asset, their unshakable resolve, is being slowly chipped away, not by bullets or fire, but by the relentless roar and crushing force of the M2 Browning's 50 caliber rounds. It's a war within their minds, where sound and destruction combine to unravel even the strongest wills. They stand firm no longer because the earth beneath them shakes with each devastating burst, each round tearing through concrete and bone alike. This acoustic onslaught, this weaponized thunder pushes their courage to the breaking point, turning fortresses into prisons of fear. In the midst of battle, the invisible enemy is no longer just the Marines advancing, but the overwhelming, terrifying howl of metal unleashed upon them without mercy or end. With the door to victory cracked open, the Marines wasted no time. They took the raw, bone-shaking power of the M2 Browning and turned it into a scalpel. Precision and psychological warfare fused in a new doctrine, targeting not just enemy positions, but the minds within them. This shift was more than tactics. It was a revelation. The M2 wasn't just about bullets tearing through bunkers, it was about breaking the unbreakable spirit inside. Every roar of the gun hammered at Japanese resolve, eroding their will to hold ground, setting the stage for a relentless steel rain that would redefine combat in the Pacific. They called it Steel Rain for good reason, a relentless downpour of 50 caliber bullets, hammering the enemy like a storm they could neither escape nor outlast. Two M2 machine guns, working in deadly harmony, fired alternating bursts into a single bunker aperture. The continuous stream of armor-piercing slugs didn't just attack the fortification, it shattered the defenders' nerves, breaking their will bit by bit. This tactic turned the M2 from a weapon of firepower into a psychological force, a suffocating presence that crushed morale before any troops ever faced hand-to-hand combat. By perfecting this coordinated hailstorm of lead, the Marines rewrote the rules of siege warfare on Peleliu. The steel rain tactic was simple, yet devastatingly effective. Two M2 machine gun crews would position themselves at a safe distance, often hundreds of yards apart, but they'd coordinate their fire flawlessly. One crew would unleash a barrage of 50-round bursts, followed swiftly by the second crew picking up the rhythm, creating an unrelenting, near-constant stream of half-inch armor-piercing slugs, pounding directly into a single bunker aperture. This deadly duet turned those once impenetrable fortifications into crumbling death traps. The relentless hammering wasn't just physical destruction, it was psychological warfare, an unstoppable, roaring thunder that crushed the defenders' will and forced them out into the open, breaking the backbone of Nakagawa's fortress one bunker at a time. They fire alternating 50-round bursts into a single bunker aperture, forging an unrelenting steel storm. Each burst slices through the air, stitching an inescapable web of half-inch slugs that pummel the enemy's stronghold relentlessly. The rhythmic roar fills the battlefield, a mechanical barrage so continuous and precise that no defender can find shelter or reprieve. It's not just firepower, it's psychological warfare made manifest in overwhelming, ceaseless hammering that chips away at both concrete and courage alike, turning impregnable fortresses into fragile tombs under a relentless rain of steel. Staff Sergeant Walter Kowalski, a battle-hardened veteran, took the new steel rain tactic to an art form. With relentless precision, he and his crew coordinated their fire, hammering bunker after bunker with devastating, alternating bursts of 50 caliber rounds. Each bunker fell not just to the crushing power of the bullets, but to the psychological torment of being trapped under a storm of steel that never ceased. Kowalski's methodical dismantling of defenses didn't just break concrete, it shattered the enemy's resolve, turning impregnable strongholds into silent tombs. His mastery marked a turning point, proving that raw firepower combined with tactical ingenuity could rewrite the brutal calculus of warfare. This relentless siege wasn't just about breaking stone, it aimed to shatter minds. Each burst of 50 caliber fire chipped away at the defenders' fortitude, eroding their sense of safety with every brutal impact. Trapped beneath crushing concrete, the Japanese soldiers faced not only physical destruction, but a creeping madness, a psychological siege that wore down their resolve as surely as the gunpowder wore down barrels. As the metal storm hammered on, hope grew thin, replaced by a gnawing dread that this thunderous assault could never be escaped. The fortress walls held, but inside, the spirit was cracking, one relentless roar at a time. Post-battle intelligence provided hard numbers that confirmed just how devastating this new tactic truly was. Analysts showed that sustained .50 caliber fire didn't just chip away at concrete, it shattered enemy morale. When two M2 crews unleashed their coordinated steel rain for as little as 15 minutes, defenders often surrendered or fled without a single close-quarters fight. This wasn't merely about physical destruction. It was psychological warfare in its rawest form. The sound, the power, the relentless thunder of those .50 caliber slugs broke the will of even the most disciplined troops. Peleliu had revealed a new truth. Sometimes, victory comes not just from weaponry, but from breaking the enemy's spirit before they can even raise their guns. Just 15 minutes of relentless .50 caliber hail aimed at a single bunker could force its defenders to abandon their positions entirely. This wasn't mere suppression through bullets. It was a methodical breaking of will. The defenders, trapped behind concrete and coral, faced not just physical destruction, but a psychological siege. The thunderous roar of the M2 Browning machine guns shattered resolve as effectively as it demolished walls. In those crucial moments, the line between holding ground and surrender blurred, proving that sustained firepower could dictate not only the battle's outcome, but the very mindset of those caught in its crossfire. Often, these positions were abandoned without a single Marine needing to fire his rifle in a direct assault. The sheer terror inflicted by the relentless .50 caliber M2 fire broke the defenders' will before they could mount any meaningful resistance. The enemy, entrenched in their impregnable bunkers, found themselves compelled to flee, not from bullets striking flesh, but from the deafening hammer of steel crashing against their fortifications. It was a new kind of warfare, psychological as much as physical, where courage crumbled under the weight of an unyielding, roaring storm of lead. Lieutenant Takashi Hayashi's diary offers a haunting glimpse into the psychological torment endured by Japanese defenders on Peleliu. He describes the relentless, thunderous roar of the .50 caliber fire as incessant thunder, a sound so overpowering it shattered their unit's discipline. This wasn't just physical destruction, it was the breakdown of morale itself. The steady, unyielding barrage made any coherent defense impossible, turning resolute soldiers into fractured survivors. In the eerie silence between bursts, fear gnawed at their resolve, dissolving even the deepest-rooted courage. Hayashi's words capture a battlefield transformed not only by shells and bullets, but by the shattering of the human spirit beneath a storm of steel. When Peleliu was finally declared secure, the battle statistics revealed a revolutionary story of firepower and resilience. Just 48 M2 Browning machine guns, relatively few in number, had unleashed an astonishing 1.8 million rounds of .50 caliber ammunition. This overwhelming volume tore through nearly 400 fortified Japanese positions, unraveling Colonel Nakagawa's intricate defensive web. The human cost reflected this shift. American casualties fell 40% below pre-invasion estimates, while Navy psychiatrists noted a 30% drop in combat fatigue among Marines, supported by constant M2 fire. These guns didn't just destroy enemy fortifications, they broke the enemy's will. The silence of Peleliu's caves was a testament to the power of industrial firepower over raw courage and strategy, forever changing the way wars would be fought. The island's 48 M2 machine guns, though relatively few in number, unleashed a relentless storm of firepower, hammering the enemy with over 1.8 million rounds of .50 caliber ammunition. This overwhelming volume was not just about sheer numbers, it reshaped the battlefield, turning what seemed like impregnable fortresses into crumbling ruins. Each bullet echoed as a decisive blow against the Japanese defenses, breaking their will and erasing their strongholds one barrage at a time. It was a testament to American industrial might and tactical innovation, proving that sometimes the fiercest weapon is not the one held in a soldier's hand, but the unyielding flood of steel raining down from their support. This relentless barrage wasn't just random gunfire. It was a carefully orchestrated assault that shattered nearly 400 fortified Japanese positions, the very core of Nakagawa's defensive genius. Each round peeled away layers of concrete and coral, transforming their once impenetrable network into fragile tombs. The immense firepower tore through the island's backbone, breaking the defenders' strategy bone by bone and leaving them exposed to the relentless advance of the Marines. It was a devastating symphony of destruction. Precision meets overwhelming force, and it changed the course of the battle forever. The human cost was dramatically altered. Instead of the grim casualty figures everyone feared, American losses were slashed by a staggering 40%. This wasn't luck. It was the hard-earned payoff for unleashing the M2 Browning's overwhelming firepower on a battlefield seemingly carved from stone itself. With each thunderous burst, the gun didn't just break bunkers, it shattered the enemy's resolve, turning what was supposed to be a massacre into a brutal but survivable fight. This weapon transformed the battle, shifting the tides and saving countless lives. It was a stark reminder. Sometimes, the deadliest weapon isn't just the one that kills, it's the one that breaks your enemy's will before the fight even truly begins. Navy psychiatrists analyzing the battle noticed something striking. Units supported by the relentless M2 heavy machine guns suffered 30% fewer cases of combat fatigue. This wasn't just a statistic, it was a testament to the weapon's potent psychological impact. The constant thunder of the 50 caliber rounds didn't only shred enemy positions, it bolstered Marine morale, giving soldiers a sense of security amid chaos and fear. Where once exhaustion and terror might have taken hold, the steady roar of the M2 became a source of strength, fueling resilience on a brutal battlefield. The M2 Browning wasn't just another weapon on the battlefield, it became a lifeline. By shattering the enemy's will, it saved countless American lives before any hand-to-hand fighting even started. Its relentless fire sowed fear deep within the fortified lines, turning once impenetrable bunkers into untenable traps. The gun's impact went beyond bullets and steel. It struck at the core of human resolve. In those moments, psychological warfare became a tangible force, proving that the battle for victory often begins long before the first charge. The interrogation of the 302 prisoners, a staggering number for a Japanese garrison, offered undeniable proof of the M2 Browning's devastating psychological impact. These men spoke not just of physical wounds, but of a terror unlike any they had faced before, the relentless, thunderous roar of the 50 caliber machine gun. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a force that shattered their will to fight, breaking the ironclad discipline so central to their defensive doctrine. Confessions emerged, stories of units unraveling amid the cacophony, a fortress turning into a prison where courage dissolved under waves of steel. This was more than a battle won by bullets, it was a battle won by fear, echoing through those caves and bloodied ridges long after the guns fell silent. Private Kuji Tanaka, still trembling in captivity, speaks of an overwhelming psychological wound inflicted not by bullets alone, but by the relentless Devil's Roar. This was no ordinary battlefield noise, it was a sonic assault that shattered nerves and frayed minds. Later identified as acoustic trauma, the relentless thunder of the M2 Browning's 50 caliber rounds didn't just threaten bodies, it broke spirits. The sound itself became a weapon, turning fierce defenders into frightened men, their courage dissolved by an unyielding, deafening storm that echoed through the caves and bunkers of Peleliu. It was a haunting roar that lingered far beyond the gunfire. The weight of defeat settled heavy on the prisoners' shoulders. One, a former military academy instructor, spoke with a rare honesty, stripping away any pretense. He admitted that their entire defensive doctrine, the very foundation of their strategy and pride, had been shattered beyond repair. It wasn't just a tactical loss. It was a complete breakdown of everything they had been trained to believe in. This grim confession echoed the stark reality faced by the Japanese defenders. The overwhelming industrial firepower and relentless 50 caliber fire had utterly undone their mindset, leaving their once impenetrable fortress empty of hope and resolve. He confessed something chilling. Their defeat wasn't a failure of tactics or bravery, but the overwhelming power of America's relentless production machine. Endless ammunition flowed like a river, transforming their once impenetrable fortresses into deadly traps with no escape. It wasn't just a battle of soldiers and strategy, it was a war of industrial might against human will. This staggering advantage crushed their defenses, turning hope into despair and making resistance feel utterly futile. The brutal lessons from Peleliu reshaped the Marine Corps forever. The harrowing battle taught a simple, chilling truth. Overwhelming firepower could shatter not only enemy defenses, but break their will to fight. This transformed doctrine emphasized an unrelenting barrage of M2 heavy machine gun fire, granting infantry units the raw, crushing power needed to suppress enemy fortifications before the first hand-to-hand clash. From Peleliu onward, Marines carried this legacy into every brutal island fight. Their tactics evolved, blending psychological warfare with sheer mechanical might, turning the once impenetrable into rubble and forcing the enemy's courage to crumble under the relentless roar of steel rain. In a decisive move that reshaped infantry, firepower, Major General Roy Geiger didn't just increase the number of M2 Browning machine guns per battalion, he shattered old limitations by authorizing unlimited ammunition expenditure for suppression. This groundbreaking directive acknowledged that victory wouldn't come from conserving bullets, but from overwhelming enemy defenses with relentless fire. The M2 was no longer just a weapon, it became an unstoppable torrent of steel, a psychological hammer breaking the enemy's will before they even faced close combat. This strategic shift marked a turning point, embedding the M2 at the heart of Marine Corps doctrine and changing the face of warfare in the Pacific forever. As the brutal invasions of Iwo Jima and Okinawa loomed on the horizon, the M2 Browning had already proven its ruthless effectiveness. It quickly became the heart of infantry firepower, a weapon not just feared but relied upon. Marines knew that this machine gun could carve through enemy defenses with relentless precision, breaking psychological and physical lines alike. Its thunderous roar was more than noise, it was a statement of raw industrial might, a chilling promise that no fortress, no matter how well built, could withstand the onslaught for long. The M2 would shape battles to come, rewriting the rules of war with every squeezed trigger. In a battlefield transformed by relentless firepower, Gunnery Sergeant Edward Harrison took a revolutionary step. His new training manual didn't just teach soldiers how to operate the M2 Browning as a heavy machine gun, it elevated the weapon into a psychological weapon of war. It was about more than just tearing through enemy fortifications, it was about breaking their will before they could even lift a rifle. Harrison drilled into every Marine the devastating impact of the M2's thunderous roar, teaching them how to use its relentless, overwhelming presence to sow fear, confusion, and despair. deep within enemy ranks. This shift wasn't just tactical, it was a game changer, turning raw firepower into a weapon that crushed minds as fiercely as it shattered concrete. The M2 Browning's design, so effective in the jungles of Peleliu, proved its timeless resilience by soldiering on through the decades. From the bitter battles of Korea to the dense Vietnam War jungles, and later the modern deserts of Iraq and rugged terrains of Afghanistan, this legendary machine gun stood as a steadfast guardian for countless infantrymen. Its unmatched firepower and psychological edge never faded, marking it not just as a weapon, but as an enduring symbol of industrial might and tactical innovation, a true titan in military history whose roar continues to echo across battlefields worldwide. Today, the silent caves of Peleliu stand as haunting monuments, their walls gouged deep by relentless 50 caliber fire. Since 1985, American and Japanese veterans have returned to this scarred island, walking the very ground where a brutal truth was carved into history. Here, courage and careful strategy met an overwhelming force that no bravery alone could overcome: raw, industrial firepower. This story leaves us with a question that echoes far beyond Peleliu's shores. What happens when the valor of warriors faces an enemy capable of simply erasing the ground beneath their feet? The answer lingers, inviting us to consider the true cost of war in a world where might and production define battlefields.
It is a colossal